On old star charts it was listed as Kepri 9, but that designation had been quietly removed after the last survey ship marked it non-viable. No magnetic field. No active core. No atmosphere thick enough to protect anything living. A world that had cooled, cracked, and given up. Dead planets didn't get second chances. Which was why Elias Rourke wasn't supposed to be there. His ship, the Wayfarer's Mercy, drifted above the gray sphere like a reluctant thought. From orbit, Kepri 9 looked peaceful in a bleak, almost beautiful way. Vast salt flats, fractured mountain ranges, and a surface dusted in pale mineral ash that reflected the distant star like powdered bone. The mission parameters were clear. Confirm extinction. Record anomalies. Leave. No landing required. No heroics. Elias sighed and rested his forehead against the cockpit glass. He'd spent 12 years doing this job, deep-range salvage and verification for the Interstellar Coalition. He was good at it because he followed rules. He didn't get attached. He didn't imagine ghosts on lifeless worlds. So when the Wayfarer's sensors chirped softly, he assumed it was a calibration error. Run it again, he muttered. The signal repeated. Not power. Not heat. Not movement. A pattern. Elias straightened slowly, fingers hovering over the console. The pattern wasn't random radiation or decaying machinery. It had rhythm. Spacing. Intent. It was old, ancient, by most standards, but it was repeating itself with stubborn consistency, pulsing up from somewhere deep beneath the planet's crust. A buried transmission. Coalition protocol said to log it and move on. Human instinct said otherwise. The listening. Elias rerouted the signal into the ship's audio filters. At first, it sounded like nothing more than static layered over deep vibration, like wind moaning through caverns. Then he adjusted the frequency range. The sound changed. It wasn't language. Not exactly. But it wasn't noise either. It rose and fell in waves that made his chest feel tight, like standing too close to a massive engine, or listening to someone breathe in their sleep. He felt it more than he heard it. A pressure behind the eyes. A sense of waiting. Someone's down there, Elias whispered, even though the bridge was empty. The ship's AI, Mira, responded calmly. Correction, no registered life forms detected on planetary scans. I know what the scans say. He played the signal again, slower this time. It repeated. Exactly. A call. Not a distress beacon. Too old, too degraded, but something far more persistent. A presence refusing to fade. Elias leaned back in his chair, conflicted. He had broken protocol before, small things, harmless deviations. But landing on a declared dead world to investigate a signal that wasn't even technically alive? That could end his career. Or worse. He exhaled sharply and began descent calculations. Prep landing thrusters, he said. Mira paused for half a second. Captain Elias Rourke, this action is not mission essential. I know, he replied, but I'm not leaving without listening properly. The dead world below. Kepri 9's surface was colder than expected. The ash crunched under Elias's boots as he stepped out of the airlock, his suit lights cutting pale cones through the gray dusk. The sky above was a dull copper, the star low on the horizon like an exhausted eye. No wind. No sound. Just silence heavy enough to feel like pressure. The signal grew stronger as he walked, guiding him toward a jagged valley split open by ancient tectonic failure. According to the scans, whatever was broadcasting lay kilometers underground. Impossible for anything biological. Unless it wasn't biological anymore. He reached the edge of a collapsed shaft, remnants of a civilization long erased. The architecture was alien, angular and smooth, carved with precision that time hadn't entirely destroyed. Someone had lived here. Someone had planned for time. Elias anchored his descent line and began climbing down, the signal vibrating through his suit like a low heartbeat. As he went deeper, the walls changed, less eroded, more intact. Faint symbols glimmered when his lights passed over them, etched into the stone with reverent care. This wasn't a bunker. It was a tomb. The shaft opened into a massive underground chamber, and Elias froze. At its center stood a crystalline structure taller than a building, fractured but still faintly glowing. Cables, organic and metallic, spilled outward like frozen veins, embedded deep into the surrounding rock. And, inside the crystal, someone was suspended. She was tall, slender, her form unmistakably alien, yet hauntingly graceful. Her skin shimmered like polished obsidian streaked with veins of light, her elongated features serene despite the damage around her. Fractures spiderwebbed through the crystal, and power levels hovered just above zero. She wasn't dead. She was entombed. Holy, Elias breathed. The signal he'd been hearing wasn't coming from a machine. It was coming from her, the last listener. Elias approached cautiously, scanning the structure. The tech was beyond Coalition classification, ancient, elegant, terrifying in its complexity. A preservation system designed to last forever, or until the universe forgot. This world died, Elias said softly, his voice echoing in the chamber. Your people are gone. The signal shifted. For the first time, it changed. His suit's translation software spiked, scrambling desperately. A flood of fragmented data slammed into his neural interface. Images, emotions, impressions rather than words. He staggered, dropping to one knee. He saw cities under bright skies. Towers grown rather than built. A civilization that listened to stars the way humans listen to oceans. He felt grief so vast it hollowed his chest, felt centuries of silence pressing in like deep water. Then a single, fragile emotion rose above the rest. Hope. A presence brushed against his thoughts, careful and gentle. You hear me? Elias swallowed hard. Yeah, he whispered. I hear you. Her name came to him not as sound, but as meaning. Salith. She had been a listener, one who communed with planetary cores, maintaining the balance that kept worlds alive. When Kepri 9's core began to fail, her people chose preservation over survival. They sealed her here, linking her consciousness to the planet itself, hoping she could one day restore it. They died waiting. Time passed. Stars shifted. No one came. Until now. The choice Elias spent 3 days in the chamber, rerouting power from his ship, stabilizing the failing systems. The more he worked, the more Salith shared. Memories of laughter under alien suns, of sorrow as the world cooled, of endless centuries spent awake but alone. You could have shut down, Elias said during one long cycle. Let yourself fade. I was made to listen, her presence replied. So I listen for anyone. The Coalition would never approve extraction. Salith was classified as an unknown xenoentity bonded to a planetary system. Removing her could destabilize what little structure remained. But leaving her here meant condemning her to eternal isolation. Humanity had rules. Humans had conscience. Elias made his decision. He dismantled the core interface, not all of it, just enough. He transferred Salith's consciousness into a mobile containment lattice, a risky maneuver that left him shaking with exhaustion. When the crystal finally dimmed, the signal stopped. For the first time in millennia, the chamber was silent. Elias lifted the containment unit carefully, cradling it like something sacred. You're not buried anymore, he said. You're coming with me. Why? She asked, her presence faint but steady. Elias smiled behind his visor. Because someone listened. A new sky, the Coalition inquiry was brutal. Elias lost his commission. His ship was confiscated. He was labeled reckless, sentimental, dangerous. He didn't care. Salith was relocated to a research habitat on the edge of human space, where scientists argued and theorized and ultimately admitted they didn't fully understand her. Elias stayed. Over time, Salith learned human language. Elias learned patience. They talked for hours about worlds, about loss, about the strange resilience of a species that refused to stop caring. Years later, using a blend of human engineering and Salith's ancient knowledge, they reignited a dead planetary core. Not Kepri 9. Another world. One written off long ago. It took decades. But when the sky finally warmed and clouds formed for the first time, Elias stood on the surface beside a crystalline projection of Salith, watching rain fall onto living soil. Your people listen differently, she said. You hear what others dismiss. Elias laughed softly.
Yeah.
It gets us into trouble. It also brings us back from the dark. He looked up at the reborn sky and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time.
Hope.
Because the universe was full of dead worlds. And humans? Humans were very, very good at listening. The rain lasted 7 hours. Elias stayed outside the habitat dome the entire time, ignoring the warnings from his suit and the gentle reminders from the station AI. He stood still as water soaked the ground of a world that, until recently, had been as dead as Kepri 9. The drops were warm. Not hot, not cold, alive. For Salith, the moment was overwhelming. Though her physical form could not yet leave the crystalline lattice that housed her consciousness, her awareness stretched across the planet's reborn core. She felt convection currents stirring, mantle layers shifting, a magnetic field, weak but growing, wrapping the world in protection like a fragile shield. It listens back, she said softly into Elias's mind. He closed his eyes. That's all you ever wanted, wasn't it? That is all any world wants. The coalition called it Project Reclamation, though the name stripped the soul from what it truly was. Officially, it was an experiment in planetary engineering. Unofficially, it was proof that the universe wasn't finished, that extinction didn't always mean the end. Human engineers came first, then biologists, then terraformers. But none of it worked until Salith spoke.
She didn't command machines.
She didn't override systems. She listened to the planet's fractures, its stresses, its ancient scars, and guided humans where to help instead of force. Where to wait. Where to let the world heal itself. For the first time in recorded history, humans weren't conquering a planet. They were cooperating with one. What the coalition never understood. Elias was offered reinstatement once the results became undeniable. A formal apology followed. Then medals. Then invitations to speak at symposiums and councils filled with people who had once voted to abandon Salith without hesitation. He declined them all. He stayed on the edge of space, near Salith, where the stars were fewer but closer. You could be famous, she said once, curious rather than judgmental. Elias smiled as he adjusted a sensor array. I already know what I did. That's enough. Your species is strange, Salith observed. You seek recognition, yet your greatest acts often happen in silence. Yeah, he replied. We're bad at explaining ourselves. Good at doing the wrong thing for the right reason. She considered this. That may be why the universe tolerates you. Elias laughed, loud and genuine, the sound echoing across a world that had once known nothing but quiet decay. The last secret of Kepri 9. Years later, when Salith was finally strong enough to sustain a partial physical form, she asked Elias for one last journey. I want to return, she said. Just once. The coalition protested. The world was still classified as unstable, unrecoverable, and sacred ground due to its role in her survival. Elias went anyway. Kepri 9 hadn't changed much. Still gray. Still fractured. Still cold. But when Salith extended her awareness, something subtle happened. Deep beneath the crust, remnants of ancient systems flickered, tiny, long-dormant constructs responding to her presence. Not enough to save the planet. Not enough to restore it. Enough to let it rest. They were afraid, she said quietly. My people. Afraid of letting go. Elias rested a hand against the stone. You stayed so they wouldn't disappear completely. I stayed because I hoped someone would hear me. He looked up at the lifeless sky. They did. Eventually, the signal that had first drawn him there, her endless call, faded completely as Salith released it. No more waiting. No more calling into the void. Kepri, 9 was finally, truly silent. Not lonely. Just finished. A future that listens. Decades passed. Worlds once written off as dead were reclassified. Not all could be saved, but many could be understood. A new human discipline emerged, xeno-resonant ecology, built on Salith's teachings and Elias's stubborn insistence that silence did not mean emptiness. Children learned about the listener who waited beneath a dead world. They learned about the human who broke protocol. They learned that the universe didn't always scream when it needed help. Sometimes it whispered. On the day Elias died, peacefully, under a living sky he helped bring back, Salith felt it instantly. The bond they shared, once forged by chance, had become something deeper than technology. She mourned him, but she did not despair, because humanity had learned, and they were still listening. Final words. Long after Elias Rourke became history, Salith continued her work. Not as a savior, not as a god, as a listener among listeners. And somewhere, on a cold world drifting through the dark, a faint signal began to pulse again. Not a cry for help, but a promise. Because the universe is full of dead worlds. And humans? Humans are the ones who stop and listen.